Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo here. It's been a while since I've made a YouTube video. I've been busy testing for the Neon Dynasty set championships. I'm looking forward to making some videos about the decks I'm going to be playing in the set championship and the decks I almost played but ultimately decided not to. I'm going to still hold off for at least a couple of days before I start making those. I do want to do well in the set championship. That's kind of my main focus. Less so trying to make content about it. I did want to make a video today though, and it's going to cover a topic that came up on Twitter. Saffron Olive made a tweet where he asked what people thought was the worst decision that Wizards had made in regards to Arena, and I responded that it was not investing enough in the client. And I wanted to kind of expand on that and offer hopefully some constructed criticism for things that I think actually could be changed to just be pretty easy improvements for the people at Wizards to make. I do want to preface this by saying there's going to be a lot of criticism in this video, and I don't really know anything about the internal workings of how Arena is developed. I don't know if these issues are going to be something you would say is the fault of the programmers. Is it the fault of the managers for not giving the programmers enough resources? I just don't know anything about that. This is just going to be criticisms of the product as it exists, not criticisms of the people who made the product, because really I don't know enough to say anything about any of that. So with that, let's jump into the various areas. These are my pet peeves. Obviously, other people are going to have some different ones, but these are going to be just general critiques about the Arena UI and how it could be better. All right, critique number one. So I've queued up a bot match. I'm playing with the card Mindhome, which I think in particular is a card that could easily have been implemented better. So my issue with this card is it has the ability to tap and scry. Scrying, especially when you're not sinking any mana into it, is something that you would very often want to do in your upkeep before your draw step. Now, if we watch, I'm going to let Sparky take a turn. Sparky's going to do whatever Sparky does. We're going to go to my turn, and bang, I'm in my draw step. It skipped right through my upkeep. So I didn't get a chance to use my Mindhome to scry during my upkeep had I wanted to. So let's pass it back. I guess I'll play a land. Let's pass it back to Sparky. And this time I'm going to set it up so I do get to scry on my upkeep. So Sparky's about to pass the turn back to me. I'm going to set a stop in my upkeep. So now before I draw, I can choose to scry, which is a behavior you might want to do depending on your hand. We're not going to choose to draw Emery this game. And so there, I got to do what I wanted to do with the card. So there's certainly an ability to make it stop in your upkeep to scry, but I think that should just be the default behavior for Mindhome. It happens so often that you want to scry in your upkeep with the card that should just be the default behavior. The way Arena works overall is it tries to give you priority whenever it thinks you might want to do something with one of your cards. So it's creating the expectation for the players that they're going to get the chance to use their cards when they would want to do that. And with Mindhome, it just breaks that expectation, because one of the common times you would want to use Mindhome is in your upkeep, and it just never automatically puts a stop there. Having to put a stop manually is both tedious, and there are also some kind of complicated scenarios where you don't actually get to set the stop when you might want to, that have to do with if you're tapped out and your opponent does something that makes you think, oh, now I want to scry. By the time the animations for their turn have started, you've already missed your opportunity to set the stop. As far as I know, there are no cards on Arena that automatically give you priority in your upkeep, but I think that there are a handful of cards that should give you priority on your upkeep think that's a pretty easy change that could be made. And I think just overall, one of the core principles of Arena is that it's going to give you priority when you would want to do things. And I think breaking that expectation is really bad, especially because the only way to learn that Maze Mindhome breaks that expectation is to have the experience where you wanted to get to Scribe, but you missed your opportunity. Players basically need to learn to memorize all the times they would want to go into full control with a particular card, and the only way to learn that is to have the bad experiences of missing opportunities you would want to take. So that's the first thing that I think could be fixed, and I think that would be a pretty straightforward thing to fix. It requires a lot of attention to detail about making sure particular cards are giving priority at the correct times, but they already do that pretty well, I would say, for the overwhelming majority of cards. It's just they need to pay a little bit more attention to a few corner cases, and things could be better. All right, for the next issue, I'm going to hop into a draft, and we're going to right away get dumped into a screen that should not exist at all. Not this screen. This screen is fine, but I'm going to join. This screen here, there is no reason for it to exist whatsoever. So basically, we're waiting for the draft queue to fill. So I guess this part of the screen is fine. It's eventually going to fill. It's going to ask me to click ready. This is the part that is a complete waste of time. Basically, I've got 7 other people prisoner. I'm going to choose to waste 1 minute of each of their time because I'm going to let my counter run down. Sorry to all the people who are in the queue right now, but I'm doing this to try to illustrate a point. There's really no reason that this window needs to exist at all. The queue times are really short. Anybody who joined the queue and wasn't willing or wasn't ready to actually be in the draft could have canceled out of the queue. This is just straight up a waste of time. Even if I click ready, usually it gets to about 20 or 30 seconds elapsed before everyone does it. It just wastes 30 seconds of your time on average in a draft. Sometimes you waste a full minute. Sometimes you even waste 2 minutes because you have back-to-back queues where someone says they're not ready. If you've ever done a draft on Magic Online, that ready check does not exist. And it does not matter that it does not exist. Even had I chosen to start the draft and then get a phone call, decide I have to move away from my computer. Well, first of all, I could click cancel. Second of all, even if I didn't, I would still have, 90 seconds to come back and make my first pick. This is not like a game like League of Legends where if you have one person missing, it completely ruins the game, and it's really important that all people be ready right at the start in order for the game to proceed. Booster drafts can continue if one person just isn't there. And honestly, this screen doesn't even do much of a job of protecting against people getting disconnected, people having to go AFK. It's really just testing in this 1 minute window, is someone actually still connected, or if they had to go AFK. The draft's going to take 20 minutes. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for people to become disconnected for some reason. And the draft's still going to continue fine if someone gets disconnected. This screen just wastes people's time. There's no reason for it to exist. And honestly, it just flat out trains people to join this queue and do what I've just done and just be disrespectful of other people's time. It really, there's no reason for that screen. It could be removed. It would just make Arena faster. Every time you wanted to draft, it would just take 20 or 30 seconds less on average to draft. All right, so I've queued up another match against Sparky, and this is going to illustrate my next area where I think that Arena does not pay enough attention to details in the client, and that's the animations. In particular, the animation on Fabled Passage. So if you pay close attention to animations on Arena, some of them are going to block user input while they're going on, and some of them are not going to block user input while they're going on. I think anybody who's been playing for a while can remember an experience where they cast a questing beast and the animation goes on forever, but they just wind up attacking while the animation's still going on. Because if you put a questing beast into play, you can just click attack all, and it will attack underneath the animation, no problem. Fabled Passage bizarrely has an animation that blocks user input. So let's go ahead and see if I can illustrate this. So just watch carefully. I'm going to crack the Fabled Passage. There's going to be an animation with a bunch of lily pads, and that is going to finish before I'm allowed to make my selection of what basic land I want. And there's just no reason for that. Like, the animation is fine, but it could easily be going on while I'm selecting my basic land. Then I would have the choice to stop and watch it, or the choice to, just let it play in the background and pick my basic land. You might think, okay, that's a really nitpicky thing. It is, but if you play a deck that has Fabled Passages in it, you're going to see that animation every game that you play with the deck. The animation is not novel anymore. It just wastes a second or two every time you want to crack a Fabled Passage. If you were paying close attention, you would have noticed that I cracked the Fabled Passage, and while the animation was playing, I've already moved my cursor to where I'm going to select the basic land. Like, I'm clearly running ahead of what the computer is doing, and there's just no reason for the computer to slow you down like that. So that's just a case where there needs to be a non-blocking animation on Fabled Passage. The animation itself is fine. It's just there's no reason to force a person to sit through the Fabled Passage animation before they can get their basic land. Honestly, the Fabled Passage animation, it's nice, but cracking a Fabled Passage and getting a basic land is a really unexciting part of the game. It's not something that needs to be commemorated with a big important animation. All right, we're battling against Sparky again. This time I'm playing with a deck that has Tainted Pact in it. Oh, I have Fabled Passage as well. So we can watch the Fabled Passage animation one more time. I'm going to go get a swamp. So I've clicked activate ability. I'm ready. I'm waiting. That little hiccup at the end, I think, is my computer taking a little while to load the graphics, but it clearly is also pausing user input for the beginning part of that animation. All right, but here we're on to the point that I wanted to make about Tainted Pact. I'm going to cast Tainted Pact right now, which is not how you would normally play this deck, but it's just to illustrate a point. So I'm playing Tainted Pact. It's showing me a Darkboard pathway. Do I want to keep that? No. But watch what happens when it takes the card off the top of the deck. It's going to go into exile, disappear, and then reappear. Very clearly, there is no need for that to happen. And the real way to use this card, you're going to go through a big chunk of your deck almost every time you use it. The way my deck is designed, I'm going to be looking to exile down to 3 or fewer cards left in my deck most of the time that I cast it. So the fact that this animation takes an extra half a second for every decision, it adds up. It makes this process really feel a lot more sluggish than it needs to. Very clearly, the animation could just flip the card off the top. There's no need to go into exile and then come back out. It's just a waste of time. So it's just another area where the animations are not as polished as they could be, which makes the gameplay feel less crisp than it should. All right, that's enough of that. The way my deck functions, if you cast Tainted Pact like this on turn 2, you cannot win the game. So I lose. Sparky, you win. Next area I wanted to talk about is what I'm going to call the Playblade Rework, because that is what the Arena developers called it. If you haven't been playing Arena for all that long, when you click play here, it didn't always used to look like this. There was a different set of windows that had a bunch of problems, and so they wanted to revamp it to make it better. Problem is, honestly, I think they made it worse. This rework is not very well done, I would say. So one of the issues, first of all, we've got these 3 options across the top here. We can play events, we can play, I guess this icon is intended to mean a 1v1 battle, or we can play what we last played. Starting with events. So this is kind of a catch-all for you're not playing on the ladder or you're not just playing an unranked standalone match. And so we've got a big jumble of different events you can join. Some of these are targeted at experienced players. Some of them are targeted at new players. So for example, the color challenges, that would be something a new player would do. Jump in, I think, is something that's mostly targeted for new players. But there's also events like a traditional historic event. That requires you to have a pretty substantial collection to be competitive in it. A traditional Neon Dynasty draft, that is pretty clearly targeted at an experienced player who's willing to draft for reasonably high stakes. If you're a new player to Arena, you have no way to navigate through this. There's nothing really directing you for what's appropriate for you, what's not really appropriate for you yet, or what's something that, you could try it if you want, but we're not recommending it. This area could just flat out be organized so that it showed, here are the new player events. They're grouped together, which is color challenge and jump in. Here are the more experienced events. There's also just a mix of, I guess the two draft events are at least next to each other. Well, two of them are. One of them is not. The draft events aren't grouped together. These bottom 6 are all constructed events, so I guess they're all grouped together. But basically, there's no organizational structure to this window, which I think is a really big flaw. Also, it's just a bizarre UI design decision for, I've clicked on something on the bottom right of the screen. It's brought up something on the right-hand side of the screen. And it is changing things in the left of the screen now. Just in, English or, Latin-based languages that happen from left to right, it's not natural for something to be asking you to give input from right to left. I think that is not a very good UI convention to be violating. Moving on to another area that really causes me a lot of frustration is once I've decided I want to play a ranked 1v1 match. When you go into this window, it does not remember your last settings. So I only ever want to play best of 3. I only ever want to play best of 3 ranked. It does not remember that. It's very easy, if you're not paying attention, to wind up playing a best of 1 friendly match, which is not what I want to be doing. So I think that you should be able to have preferences on this window for what are the defaults going to be. And it's fine if I don't want to use the default, I can change it, but it should remember that I want to play ranked best of 3. That is what I want to do 99.9% of the time. I shouldn't have to go through the selection process the overwhelming majority of the time I want to play a match. Another issue with this window. Let's say I want to play a best of 3 historic match. It's gone and it's showing me a selection of my decks. What it has done is it is showing me a selection of decks that are legal in historic. That is very different from a selection of decks that I actually want to play in historic. So if we look here, we've got Naya Runes version 2. This is not a deck that I have intended to play in historic. It is an alchemy deck. And you might say, okay, well, how's Arena supposed to know that? It's legal. If we go into the deck editor, I've gone into the deck editor from the match selection portion. It is now saying this is a traditional historic deck. It is true that my deck is legal in historic. It is not true that I have imported it and chosen for it to be a traditional historic deck. If we go into the deck editor, we look at the same deck, Naya Runes version 2. We can see I've indicated this is a traditional alchemy deck. That is the format that I've indicated I want to use this deck in. This window here, where I select what deck I'm going to be playing, it should respect the information that I've given Arena. This list should be filtered down to the decks I have specified as decks I want to play in traditional historic rank. There should also be an option for all legal decks, but the default should be that you're only showing me the decks that I've indicated I want to play in this format. and that is not what is happening. You're seeing I've just got a massive list of decks. There's no option for how to sort it. There's no ability to filter it down to just the decks that I want to be my historic decks. It's just a giant jumble that makes it harder to find the deck you want to play than it should be. Furthermore, for just getting into a match, if we go back into my Naya Runes version 2 deck here, I've indicated I want to play this deck in traditional alchemy. Why isn't there just a button on this screen that's, go play? Like, why can't I just click on a button here, play this deck in a ladder match? Or play this deck not in a ladder match? Whatever my preference is, I should be able to do it from the screen. A very common use pattern is I play my deck on the ladder. I win, I lose, I decide I'm going to change 1 or 2 cards into my deck. So I go into this deck editing screen, I make my 1 or 2 changes, now I'm ready to play the deck again. Why do I have to save my deck, back out, go to the play window, choose historic, and then choose my deck? Your deck will be the first deck because you've just edited it, but this is just a whole bunch of extra steps that there's really no need for it to exist, because when we're in the deck editing window, I've already given Arena basically all the information it needs to know how to put me into a match. Really, the only thing I haven't specified here is whether I would prefer to play ranked or unranked, but that is something that could be added as an option, a preference. Just something so I can right away play would be great in this window. Moving on to a different area that is another area that is just a frustrating UI experience. The sideboards on Arena. So for a long time in Best of 1 and Best of 3, you used to be able to play with 15 card sideboards. That got changed to you can only use 7 card sideboards in Best of 1. In Best of 3, you can still use 15 card sideboards. So the UI was changed to accommodate that, and honestly, it just butchered the experience for people playing in Best of 3. So take a quick look at the sideboard. Tell me how many copies of Pithing Needle you think I have in my sideboard. The answer is 2, which if you look closely here, I've got 1 here and 1 here. What's happened is because Arena is trying to facilitate the ability to play this deck in Best of 1, it's had me enter the first 7 cards are my Best of 1 sideboard. The remaining cards are my Best of 3 sideboard. I don't have any interest in ever playing this deck in Best of 1. Yet again, if we go to my deck details, I've specified that this is a deck I want to play in traditional historic. I'm just getting a worse user interface experience because it's trying to accomplish something I never want to do. I would like to see these Pithing Needles right next to each other. You can sort of game the system based on what order you enter your sideboard cards in, but that is not really how people edit sideboards. If you want to change 1 or 2 cards, you're going to wind up breaking this ordering that you've gamed eventually. There's also just straight up a bug in how this user interface works. So if we back out, we'll start fresh. Look at the sideboard. Notice I've got a nice long scroll bar that I can slide up and down. I can see all the cards in my sideboard. That's working great. I'm going to expand this. Don't need a scroll bar anymore. I can see all of my cards, except Tempted by the Orcs kind of hiding under the done button, but we can at least see 14 of the 15 cards clearly. All right, so now I've decided, all right, I'm going to change a card in my sideboard. We're getting rid of Tempted by the Auric. We're going to play Invoke the Winds instead. So here we go. I've minimized, or I've shrunk my deck down so I can search for the Invoke the Winds. I found it. Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to take out my Tempted by the Auric and put in Invoke the Winds. The scroll bar just doesn't resize correctly. I can no longer scroll to the point that I see my Invoke the Winds. That's just a straight up bug. And I worked as a computer programmer for a long time. I have to say, this is a really, it boggles my mind that you could even create something that has a bug like this. Because scroll bars are usually pretty standardized widgets attached to things. And getting them to not work correctly, something really went wrong here. I've changed my mind. I don't want to put Invoke the Winds in my deck. We're just going to leave it as Tempted by the Auric, and we're going to hope that bug gets fixed. All right, and now we come to the big one, cosmetics. People who have watched me stream know that I really, really despise the way cosmetics work on Arena. So let's go into this deck, the Hinata Alchemy deck. And we're going to take all these Burn Down the Houses out of the deck to start to illustrate this point. Might have to save the deck. All right, let's go into the deck again. And I'm going to put these Burn Down the Houses back in my deck. And you'll notice that it's come up with this card style, which I don't like this card style. I don't like any of these kind of parallax card styles where the card's moving around. I don't ever want to use any of them. But it just comes up by default using it. So I'm going to add them to my deck. I now need to go to the card styles, change it. Okay, so I've gotten what I want, which is I want to be using this image of Burn Down the House. And I know what some people are going to say is, well, there's some settings that allow you to have it work the way you want. We're going to go and look at those settings, which I believe are in gameplay. So I have hide alternate art styles checked. I have auto apply card styles unchecked. These are the settings that have something to do with how card styles work. I don't really understand what they do exactly, but I know that they do not do what I want them to do, which is I don't want the default card style for Burn Down the House to be the parallax one. And just to be clear, I did not choose to have that card style on my account. I received that probably as a reward for doing well on the ladder in some month. To me, it's a penalty because honestly, every time I build a deck and I put Burn Down the House in my deck, I have to go and manually edit the card style to go back to the default version, which is what I want to use. And that's just, I mean, that's crazy to me. The cosmetics should be a way that Arena is trying to additionally monetize the game. But your ability to control what cosmetics you are using is so poor that I think it really just reduces the value of the cosmetics. I think a lot of people make a complaint about Wizards' handling of Arena that they only seem to put money and effort behind things that are going to directly make them money. And I think this is an area where, honestly, they're trying to sell cosmetics. The cosmetics are so badly handled that I just don't think they're making as much money as they could be making. If I could actually have control of how the cosmetics work, I might be inclined to buy some of them. So for example, let's go and look at Nizzet Phoenix list. I'm using this artwork of Faithless Looting, which some people love it, some people hate it. I'm probably on the side of I don't particularly like it, but maybe I like it a little bit more than some people. But if we look at the card styles for this, that's a pretty nice looking card style. It's a little bit wonky that it's in Japanese, but I would know what card it is. So I could maybe have purchased this style and, then I would get to use an artwork I prefer, and that would be nice. The problem with this is if I decide to do that, there is no ability for me to turn that off when I'm drafting. When I'm drafting, I would like all the cards to show up with their default style in English, because I frequently stream myself drafting Cube, and I want my viewers to be able to read the cards when they're on the screen. So I do not want to wind up with a Japanese alternate art card style that people are not going to know what the card does. Just having the ability to turn off the styles while I'm drafting would lead to me actually maybe wanting some of the styles. I think I almost definitely would have at some point bought that Faithless Looting to have the option to play with it if I knew that I was going to have the option to turn it off when I'm drafting cube. I know that I don't have that option, so I just never, ever choose to acquire any of the card styles. If I have an option to acquire them, I choose not to. The only card styles I have are the ones that were forced on my account. Moving on to another thing, I'm going to group in cosmetics, which I don't think is generally thought of as being part of cosmetics by the Arena team, is the basic lands. So we can see here, I've got a wide variety of islands. Whenever I import a deck, I don't know which island it gets used by default. It's usually the last island I've acquired, so that's probably some Neon Dynasty island artwork. If I'm making a deck by hand and putting the islands in by hand, I'll just pick one of these artworks at random. This is the one I've chosen to use. This might actually be a Neon Dynasty one, I'm not sure. That might be an Innistrad one. I don't know where it's from. My personal preference with the basic lands is I like to just use a variety of the different basic lands. I think the artwork of Magic is awesome. I think almost all of the basic lands just look good. So I'm happy to use a wide variety of them. You know, I'd like to have a different island in each of my decks. I'd also like to have the option of just automatically mixing and matching the islands. But this is something where if you go in the store, very clearly they're trying to monetize selling you different versions of basic lands. I know a lot of people liked the pixelated snow-covered lands when they were released. But here's the thing. You don't have a way to make that your default basic land. It's just going to default to whatever basic land you collected last was. So when you first buy them, it'll be great. You'll be getting that basic land in your decks. Eventually, it'll get to the point, though, where you have to go in and manually select it every time. That's just crazy. You're just greatly reducing the value of something you're trying to sell to someone because you're making it annoying to use. Doesn't make any sense. And it's a really common feature request for the ability to set a favorite basic land and just have that be the basic land you use. And I gotta be honest, I think that is like below the bare minimum of what the feature should be. You should be able to feature multiple basic lands. You should be able to choose, you know, give me a random basic land from this set that I favored. You should be able to choose, give me a random mix of mismatched basic lands from this set of lands I favored. You should be able to say, give me a basic land from this group I favored and cycle through them as I go through different draft decks, because I want to see, you know, I want to see this basic land, and then my next deck, I want to see a second basic land I favored. There should just be a lot of options so you could actually customize your experience to be what you want in terms of how the cosmetics are working. And honestly, right now, the features are below a bare bones level. Basically, in order for you to make your deck look the way that you want it to look, you just have to do everything manually. And that's just crazy in a computer program. It really should not be this bad, especially in an area that Wizards is directly trying to make money from in the game. So that was my last area of critique. I know that it was a lot of criticism about how Arena works, and I hope that it's taken as constructive criticism for things that could be made better. I didn't touch on any sort of features that are straight up missing. Like, obviously, I think that there should be a tournament mode. I think there should be a spectator mode. But that wasn't the focus of this video. This was just areas that already exist that I think could be improved. So please leave a comment if you agree, or if you think there's something I missed, leave a comment about that, and I'll look forward to reading them. Thanks.